Hi, Cliff Bray here. Welcome to another episode of Hummel Hospital. Today we're looking at Hummel number 201, which is entitled Retreat to Safety. It depicts a small Bavarian boy climbing over a fence, trying to get away from this large green frog. This was based on one of Sister Hummel's original artworks, and is one of the larger versions, about 5.5 inches tall. Now I got this on eBay for about $4, and you may wonder why would it be so inexpensive, because even though Hummel prices have gone down over the years, especially one this big would have fetched a much higher price. But the description on eBay explained the reason, and that was it's been repaired. The head and shoulders were broken off at one time. And unfortunately, the person who tried to repair it used some kind of like a resin-based glue that dried very hard. And they used too much glue as well. And the glue is actually piled up here. When you run your finger over this, it's raised. So there's two problems. One is it has discolored over the years, or it could have even dried that way when the person glued it back the first time, I don't know. But this is going to have to be removed, and it's not just removing the discoloration here, but it's also raised up enough that it almost is going to have to be like ground down to make it look fairly smooth along here. The brake, of course, goes all the way around. And the person who did the gluing also allowed the glue to run down the front of the light blue shirt right here, and also in the seam right there, it collected, and on the sleeve. So that will have to all be removed as well. After the glue is removed, then we'll have to evaluate what kind of damage has been done to the paint itself, and of course we'll have to do some touch-up painting there as well. But I believe this can be kind of restored a little bit to where you won't be able to see it so clearly here, that it is broken, and it will actually be something that someone will have to look at, pretty close to be able to tell that there actually was a break there at one time. So I'll get started on that, and I'll be back with you, and we'll see how taking the glue works. And the next step then will be touching it up, but I'll come back to you before we touch up the paint and show you how it looks with the glue removed. Just zoom in one more time to kind of show you that glue. And it certainly is a mess. Kind of sad, because it could have been repaired with just a tiny bit of glue, and you may not have been able to see that break hardly at all. I'll be back in a few minutes. I finished cleaning off the brown stains caused by that glue on those 6 different squares on the back of the shirt, and the glue came off very well using that super glue remover. If you recall, right in this square right here, there were those 2 blobs of glue that kind of looked like 2 bubbles of glue right in there. They came out good too. Again, this area right here, this area right down here, and the area right back over here, that's actually the original paint that the artist put in there as kind of a shading type of an effect. Sometimes it's good to get photographs or pictures of one of these right out of the box, maybe, to kind of tell what's the artist paint and what's actually maybe mixed in there. It's actually a stain. But all of that brown came off very good. So what we'll work on next is this blobs of glue right here that's holding the major crack in place. and it's piled up. It's not flat against the surface there, so there's a lot of glue to have to remove there. So we'll start working on that. It's always important to take that off in layers, a little bit at a time, very gently, which is what I did for these different squares on the back here, because if you press too hard, you could do damage to the paint. Sometimes you'll see these little breaks here, like in the line. That's actually the artist. I mean, that's just the artist's technique. That's not where, in trying to clean this up, you damage the paint. And so again, sometimes it's good to go back and take a look at a photo of one of these out of the box to see just kind of the techniques the artist used. Because especially on these Hummels, there's an awful lot of kind of splotchy type paint and stuff that it is hard to tell sometimes what might be a stain and what might be the original paint. But that right in there is the original paint. So I'm going to start working on this area up here, and I'll be back. I have finished removing the glue from the back of the shirt that was mainly on either side of that crack line, and it came off very well. It did take quite a while. These are the swabs that I used with the super glue remover, and each one of those represents about 5 minutes or so of scrubbing away on that glue that was very sloppily put on the back of the shirt there. We will have to fill in that crack with a little bit of plaster before we do the touch-up paint. Otherwise, there will just always be a shadow along there as the light hits that crack, but we can fix that. As I was working along underneath the hat here, where the glue is really piled up, you can see how it comes on down and goes around the chin. That's where the crack went, so it kind of cracked away at the chin up front here, and then went around to crack along the shoulder in the back. And you can see how whoever put that glue on there really, again, kind of slopped it on. And so it has certainly stained the face there by the chin, and we're going to have to remove all of that. The glue also ran down the front of the shirt here, and there was no need for that because the crack just goes underneath the chin. The crack is not down there anywhere. But we'll remove all that glue and the glue that's on the shirt sleeve as well. And then the crack comes back on around, and that's where it jumps over from the chin to the sleeve on the upper arm, and then starts to wrap around to the back where I just got through cleaning the glue. So, good progress so far, and I'll start removing the rest of that glue and I'll be back. I have finished cleaning the glue off of the white t-shirt and the neck area, and it came out very well. I'm real pleased with it. I believe I'll be able to paint over that crack there with just some white glossy paint, and should be very hard to detect the crack there underneath the chin and along the neck. Touching up the paint for the crack along the shirt will be a little bit more difficult because of the different shades of blue there. But before I attempt to do that, I'm going to fill in that cracked area there with some water-soluble powdered putty here. And once I get through doing that, I'll be back. I have finished filling in the crack with the plaster, as you can see there. In a couple of places, the plaster kind of spreads out a little bit, especially kind of right back there in the shadows there. You'll see kind of a little dot of white plaster. And that's because that's actually a chip. So the break was not, perfectly clean. There were these little chips that came out in about 3 places. other than that, it was a pretty smooth crack. But the plaster filled those in. So we should be all set to go. For the touch-up paint, I'll be using a variety here of blues and whites and cream colors here, and mixing those together to try to get the exact color that is shown on the shirt. And there's really two colors, kind of a dark blue, which is the stripes and checkerboards there, and then in the middle of each of the squares is that lighter blue. But most Hummel artists use this visible brush stroke method, where you can actually see the brush strokes. So I have to duplicate that as well as duplicating kind of, the broken lines there in the checkerboard, and not making it to where it's just this, perfectly real dark straight line going across the crack there in the 3 or 4 places where I have to do the dark blue. So all of that takes, technique and takes practice. It also takes different kinds of brushes, and so I have a very thin brush here and a very, not real wide, but a wider brush. The wider brush, of course, is to duplicate those brush stroke look there, see? And what they do is they put a little bit of the really dark blue paint on the brush and then some of the lighter blue, and it's really not mixed all together. So when they start brushing it on, it gives that streaking look there that is just kind of a Hummel trait. You can see it down here, the brush strokes on the pants there. You even see the brush strokes on the shoes down here, and the brush strokes on the wood. Of course, those brush strokes are supposed to help it look like real wood as well. So I will go ahead and start mixing up these paints and experimenting with different colors, and then I'll be back and we'll see how the touch-up is going. I have finished touching up the blue paint on the shirt, as well as the white paint, especially at the top of the white shirt there. And the front of the white shirt where the glue had stained the sleeve and the white shirt. And I have to say, it all looks very well. I'm very pleased with the results, especially when you take a look at how it looked when we got started. This is the eBay ad, and clearly shows that crack and how it was so poorly repaired with all of that reddish brown glue kind of slopped on there. I took this photograph here just before I started the repair, and you can see how thick that glue was and how it was piled up. Comparing it now with that is quite a difference, especially when you just walk up on it. You can still see that curved crack there. You will never repair one of these cracked Hummels, especially when the whole head and shoulders and arm have been broken off. But you can make it where it just almost blends right in the way I matched that blue paint. That was not easy to do. I will show you the palette I used, and it gives you an idea of just all the different shades of blue and the whites and everything I had to experiment with to get it just right. When you kind of glance at it, you don't really see any of the paint that I have on there, because there is paint that I put on there. It really does blend in very well with the original paint, including the blue that is on the crack itself line. It's very well matched. I elected to put a clear varnish on the shirt. This is the varnish right here. And I did that for a couple of reasons. Hummel artists almost always have parts of the figurine that they put some type of a glaze or a varnish on. On this particular one, this orange kerchief was glazed, as well as these small red flowers and the socks. But the blue shirt was not, which is pretty clearly seen in this photograph that I took, how dull it was. And by putting that glaze on there, I think it makes it look better, first of all, but it also helps to cover up the defects there from the crack because of the way the light reflects off of that shiny varnish. It just helps kind of break everything up where your eye doesn't go immediately to that crack, as it does when everything is kind of a flat blue color. Just a technique of mine. Another technique I could have mentioned earlier was anytime you are working on these figurines, you need to lay them over and hold them, firmly down while you paint some of these areas. And in order to do that, I use these bean bags that you can buy online, just like for any bean bag toss game. And especially when you put two of them side by side like this, you can really cradle the figurine in there and put some pressure on there and hold it in place while you paint or rub on that glued area that I had to remove about 1,000 strokes. So highly recommend that. Again, just a little tip I'll just give you. So project is all complete. This will now go on display. I think most people that would just come up and look at it on a shelf really won't notice right away if there's anything major wrong with it. Certainly not to the degree that it would have shown up instantly before. The crack that's on there that you can see actually makes this a very unique Hummel, because now it's the only one of this version of a Hummel that has a little curved blue line on it like that actually matches the paint very well and is underneath the glaze now. So kind of a one-of-a-kind version of the retreat to safety Hummel. Yeah. Hopefully I gave you some good advice that you can use while you are removing glue like was on here, and then having to touch up the areas and fill in the crack with some plaster, and also just the use of that varnish, I think, is a good technique you may want to consider whenever you are repairing a Hummel like this. So one last look at it there. Again, the shirt completely clean, the arm of the sleeve completely clean, the back of the shirt completely clean of all that glue. And then the paint has been touched up to match the blue design from the original artwork, and then the glaze put on there. Sometimes people will, see a Hummel like this or another figurine that's been repaired, and they just kind of throw it in the trash. And so I was glad that the previous owner put this on eBay and sold it to me, and gave me the chance to kind of resurrect it, because it will not go in the trash now. It will be displayed, perhaps forever. And it's very sad, because these are all works of art, and to think about one of them ever winding up in a trash can just because it was, broken or had a stain on it, like the stain from that previous glue, it's kind of sad to think about. So that won't happen to this one here. So that ends this episode of Hummel Hospital, and I'll see you in the next episode.